G'day and welcome back to the shed for part 2 of this HMV record player. Apparently it's a model C1-81 made from 1955 to 1957. In part 1 I had a look over it and decided it really was a piece of crap, but despite all common sense I went ahead and overhauled the turntable and at least got that working nicely. But the case is in pretty bad condition. It's missing an output valve, the speaker's beyond repair. So can I get it playing and turn it into something worth having? At this stage I don't know. It might end up in the bin, or I might end up fixing the cabinet up and putting a better amp and turntable in it, or not. I guess I'll just keep going with it and see what we end up with. Okay, now I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but I've got the cartridge output hooked up to the oscilloscope. I've got it on a fairly sensitive setting, and that on the screen, that's just hum. There is nothing happening when I rub the needle with my finger, apart from maybe that's just a bit of hum. That's nothing else. There's no voltage that I can see being generated. Nothing. And that's on 5 millivolts. So yeah, it's not working, at least as far as I can tell. I realise that this old Philips radio that I've been using as a kitchen radio does have a pickup input. So I've wired the cartridge, or wired the output to this. I had to take the back off because I didn't have a plug to fit into it. I guess we fire it up now.
The first 2 referendums voted to stay with France. Today's
okay,
vote
now
is
I'll put it on
to be more one-sided.
pickup, which I think is there. A bit of volume. We have hum. Yep, so there's grid hum on there. Now, for a record. And the trouble with doing YouTube videos about turntables is that almost anything I put on this thing is going to get me a copyright breach. So I'm afraid you're going to be treated to Tijuana Sounds of Brass, not by Herb Albert. I think that needs to go into 33. And we'll see what happens. Not contacting. 45, 30. Oh, that's because I haven't put the power on it. Okay. There we go. And I'm hearing nothing. There is a slight little bit of it coming through the radio, but almost nothing. Oh, I think we're on 45. I don't think it matters. That's disappointing. That's just needle talk you can hear. That's not coming through the amplifier. I'll just see that it shuts off at the end. The turntable's running nicely as far as that goes, but I think we've run into a problem with this cartridge. Well, I've got my last remaining crystal cartridge here, and it appears to be identical to the one that's in it, which is good in that I can just slip it in without a lot of modification, and bad in that it's likely to have deteriorated in the same way as the other one. Anyway, here we are. It's still in its original packaging. I'll just take the little screw out there. Just sit in there. Now, if I'm lucky, this should just slide out the same way as the other one, and I should be able to just put it in. This should just slide out. Yep. And on with its connectors. on. Okay. So now for the moment of truth. So on with Herb Albert and well, it's not Herb Albert, but the Tijuana sounded brass. I've got it on 33 this time. I'll turn this up. We have yep, that's connected. All right, this sounds more promising already. Actually, I can hear clicks through the pickup. That sounds good. Wait for it. Wait for it. That sounds good. So, we have a working turntable. It did take quite a lot of volume for that to pick up. I don't know what the output of this cartridge is supposed to be. Probably not well matched to the radio input, but I'm hoping it will be enough for this, for the gramophone. I don't know what other options I've got anyway. I don't fancy my chances of finding a higher output cartridge, but we'll see what it sounds like when it's connected up to this, and hopefully it'll be all right. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, so we're getting there. Now I have to try and work out what I'm going to do about this turntable mat too. I'll make a few inquiries, put it aside for now, and I guess the next thing now is the case. I haven't been looking forward to that, but I have a plan. Well, it's a nice sunny day, so I've set up outside on the back table, and I've been having a look at this cabinet for a few days now, and I've decided that it's pretty much too far gone to resurrect the covering on it. This I would probably manage. I would have to glue it, fix the woodwork up, glue it back, and probably paint it to cover the repairs. And if you paint them with vinyl spray, they don't look too bad. But around the back here, this has had it. This has had it. I think this side of it's been a bit wet. The underside's not too bad, missing a foot. But anyway, long story short, I've decided to buy some Tolex, and it's just arrived in the mail. So I'm going to strip this, repair it as necessary, and recover it with Tolex. I've dived in feet first and spent more money on this unit than it's ever going to be worth now. So yeah, it's all or nothing, I guess. It's going to work. At least I know that the turntable works, the cartridge works. I can get the amp working once my valve arrives, which it still hasn't. Yeah, it should be a going unit, but at some cost. So I'll get some tools and we'll start pulling this apart. Okay, well, I guess we'll start with the lid. These screws are, or at least they're coming out, they're very rusted. Okay, we've got a little container of white vinegar here. I'll just throw the screws and everything into that. I really don't hold out much hope of resurrecting these hinges. I'll try and get replacements for them, but if I can't, white vinegar is good stuff. You put something very rusty in there, and a couple of days later you can pretty much scrub the rust off with a toothbrush. Okay, so that's the lid. So this is the Tolex I bought. I've got some in ivory and baby blue. It's not quite the same as what was on the cabinet, although once that was cleaned up it might look something like this. But it was the closest I could get, and so we'll go with this. I think I've got a fair bit here, so there should be plenty, should be easily enough to finish the job. I'm wondering if I should wet that or something. Okay, so I've given that a soak with spray and wipe, followed by a good bit of water. I've let it soak while I went and had a cup of coffee, and I don't know to what extent the water's penetrated the old rec seam. Anyway, wipe off the excess and I'll see if that's any easier to peel off now. So we were working on this. Yep, that has made some difference. Okay, this is obviously a separate piece, or maybe not. Oh, I see how they've done it. Peeling this off, it's left under the rexine on the top. Yep. How's that? So soaking it in spray and wipe and water has made it come off quite easily, and that's a nice piece for a future project. Just peeling this off, I noticed that they've used a separate piece for the front and for the back, which is this one, and that results in a seam right across the front. Now that's where it's most seen, which might be fine if you're working in a record player factory and you've got all the right equipment and a lot of skill, but I'm thinking that I want to wrap a piece around the front and avoid this join here, so I can't follow the template of the old pieces exactly, but I think I'll be able to make do anyway. I hope so. This doesn't come off particularly easily, but soaking it certainly does make a difference. Okay, well I've peeled it all off, pieced the various pieces together. I did make a couple of pencil marks on this to line it up. So I guess the next thing to do is to transfer this onto the back of the material that I have, and I'm not going to cut it exactly, but to cut something approximately to size and then mark it up and work from there. Okay, I've got it, got the Tolex laid out on the table. I've got this ancient builder's square that I'm going to use just to make sure that it's square to the piece I've got. That will do. Sharp new blade in my box cutter. So we can cut straight across here. Okay, so this is the scary bit. I'm going to mark up the back of the Tolex with a pencil exactly along the lines of the old piece. Some extra, but initially I'm going to mark it as it is. Inside of the lines of the template. Okay. I'll give myself a bit of extra here. think might be useful is to mark the centre. Alright, now I'll just make some cuts out of those corners. This stuff's very thin, it cuts nice and easily. From my limited experience of using this stuff, I know that it's quite unforgiving. It'll show any irregularity in the surface. Also, this lid's covered in dry glue and it's a bit not quite straight. I don't know what I can do about that. But anyway, I'll give it a good sand, and I notice these nails have rusted, so I'm going to have to do something with that. I think I'm going to have to get a bit of glue in these joins, and I'll deal with those nail heads before I go further. Perhaps a bit of filler in here too. Okay, so I've got the edges glued and clamped up. I don't think I'll have to do the front and back edges, they weren't lifting as badly. And I'm just going to put a little bit of filler . That'll sand off okay. While that's drying, I'm just going to put a dab of kill rust paint on the tops of these screw heads, nail heads. I'd like to use some rust converter on these, but it's oxalic acid, I think, and that eats wood, so I don't want to damage the woodwork. So I'm just going to put some of this on it. I've sanded them back so I can see shiny metal, and I'm hoping that this will be enough to prevent any rust coming through. Okay, I've moved into the shed because it's not great weather outside today, and I'm going to do it on the bench here. Now, the videos I watched suggested that you use brush-on contact adhesive. Wouldn't have been my first choice. I was thinking of using the spray-on stuff, but apparently you need a pretty heavy coat. So I'm going to brush it onto the lid here, using this cheap paintbrush, which will probably never be good for anything again. And we'll just brush a good coat on this. Good thick coat, they suggested. Okay, so that's the lid done, all four sides. I missed a bit there. So I'll put that aside, and the next thing we do is put some on the Tolex itself. Okay, so I've masked off the bits of the Tolex that will fold over, so I'm only going to get it on the part that will stick on the outside of the case. And well, here goes nothing. We'll try and get it on a bit more evenly this time. Alright, so now we wait for that to go tacky, and then I've marked the centre lines and I've marked them on the lid, so I'm just going to place the lid on it roller it with the roller I've got here. I think this is an old inking roller, but it should do the trick. And hope for the best. So now I'm just going to lower the lid onto it, keeping the centre lines as straight as I can. So that's lining up with that. That's on the centre there. That's as good as I'm going to get, so I'm going to press it on. Turn it upside down and roller it. From the centre out. Rolling over the edge. Yes, it is. So I'll just roll it over that. Alright, so tip this up again. And so I'm going to cut this one first and then fold the other piece over it and cut it along the same line, hopefully. Okay, and the same on this side. And that should fold down like that. Same here. That should fold down like that. This gets trimmed straight down here. In fact, I need to take that to the centre of the curve, which is going to be back a little bit, but I'll leave that where it is for the moment. So I'll now do the same with the front corners. Now, just fold this up. Those rounded corners aren't that hard. Okay, so I've done the same with the inside of the lid. A little bit of stuff stuck on it there. And it's pretty much gone off, so I'm going to fold the sides over first and then fold the back and front on top of it. So yeah, wish me luck. Here we go. I'm not pressing these corners in hard yet because they need to be lifted again after they're cut. Now I'll just fold that in. And I'm going to use the roller again as far as I can to push it in and down flat. I'll just use the edge of the steel ruler to push it in here. I'll trim that off shortly, but I think that's pretty good. It looks like a nice sharp square line. 1 down, 3 to go. Now these corners, single out. And we lift that. And we remove the cut piece. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so this glue's gone off pretty well. And I'm going to start in the back corner because that will be most visible with the lid open. And probably try and get it along a straight line along the back. I'll go over it with the roller. Well, that doesn't look too bad. Pretty nicely finished. As I took the fittings off the cabinet, I put them into a pot of white vinegar, and normally 24 hours is plenty for that, but in this case they've been sitting there for, 3 days, 4 days? Which I think is too long. It looks pretty disgusting, I'd have to say. Okay, so I've got a bucket of water there. I'll start with this handle because it's in the way. This is just a nylon brush, not a wire brush or anything like that. And I don't know if you can see that, but the rust just scrubs off with a brush, leaving a, I suppose a dull metal finish, but there's certainly no, there's a little bit there I've missed, certainly no rust left on it. Okay, so yeah, that's it. You can see I don't know how well you can see that, but they're just dull grey. I'll put that somewhere. Alright, so let's see what horrors are lurking in here. This is one of the hinges, and I can't get these anywhere. These are really hard to get. I would have thought they were really common actually. I've seen so many of them around. But when I went to the big green hardware store, no, they don't have any. I looked online, I couldn't buy any. Of course I don't know what they're called, so I can't really search. It's difficult to search for something that you don't know the name of. As you can see, after a few days in the vinegar, the rust just comes straight off, leaving this dull metal surface. I don't know how I'd go polishing that up. I'll probably have to paint these. Still plating on the back. But it's surprising just how the rust scrubs off. These suitcase clips I had written off. I won't reuse those. I can get something similar. But just for the exercise, I thought I'd see how they came up. Well, I've finished the lid. I'll finish off the rest of the cabinet this weekend, I think. But in the meantime, the capacitors have arrived from Carl, so that motivated me to start thinking about the chassis again. So I went and saw my friend Ron. Now, Ron has a vast collection of valves, but a 6AB8 wasn't among them. What he did have, however, was one of these 6GV8. Now, it's an identical valve, a triode pentode, and the only difference is a slight difference in the pinouts. So I've gone over the pinouts and worked out what I need to do, and they are identical except for, where are we? pins 7 and 8. Yes, so just going over the connections again, the 6GV8, that's the one I got today, is virtually identical. Pin 1 is the plate of the triode, pin 2 is the triode grid, pin 3 is the cathode, and on the 6AB8 that's a common cathode, whereas the 6GV8 has separate cathodes, the other one being on 8. Pin 4 again is the heater, pin 5 is the heater on both tubes, pin 6 is pentode plate on both tubes. Pins 7 and 8 are different. Pin 7 on the 6GV8 is grid number 2, and that's pin 8 on the 6AB8. And pin 9 on both tubes is grid number 1 of the pentode section. So I basically just need to swap connections on pin 7 and 8 and I can use this tube. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to fire it up and see if it works. Alright, so first I'll just take the ground off pin 7, just pull him out, just like that. And this red wire has to come off pin 8 and go to pin 7. Not sure if it'll reach, but he's looped through. Might just have to cut that off and extract the pieces. Okay, well that's that done. I've just taken the earth off here and put it to this pin here, an extra bit of wire, and taken this red wire from B plus onto here, which is the plate. That should be no problems at all. Sorry, it's the screen grid, not the plate. The only other thing I'm going to do is change this cap which connects the pentode grid to the plate of the triode, and if that's bad it will put plate voltage on the pentode grid, which I don't particularly want. If it's bad, it would cook this valve, and I've had enough trouble finding one. And it's possibly what took out the original valve. So I'm just going to change this one before I go any further, just so I don't risk cooking the valve. All right, well, I've hooked it up to the dim bulb. Just being overcautious, I haven't plugged in the new tube yet. I'm just going to give it a run to make sure that I haven't shorted anything out. So here we go. Oh, might help if I plug the dim bulb in. Okay. Nothing there. Do we have a heater on that tube? There's something not happening here. Oh, try turning on the power. I'm seeing a heater in the rectifier tube, so I don't suppose you'd expect much more. Alright, well that's not going bang. I'll put it on dim bulb, leave it on dim bulb, and I'm going to plug in the 6GV8. Okay. Turning it on. Still not seeing anything on the dim bulb, but being a 2-valve set, maybe it's just not going to do anything. I've got it hooked up to the bench speaker here, so might get some grid hum if it's doing anything. Yep, I'm seeing a heater. I'm seeing 2 heaters. I'm not hearing any noise. Not pot crackle, not anything. Yep, I think I did. No, nothing. Well, the dim bulb's not lighting up like a Christmas tree, so I'm going to turn it off and go to full power. Not hearing anything. Nothing. I know the output transformer's got continuity. I should be hearing something, surely. Something not right here. I'll turn it upside down and check some voltages, I guess. Okay, I'm just gonna plug it in again. Plugging it straight into power because there's no point in running it through the dim bulb. It's not lighting up or anything. Get the plug happening here. Alright, switch it on. You probably can't see the meter, but it's connected to, maybe if I put it here you can see it. Connected to DC volts anyway. We should have some plate voltage on pin 1. That's the triode plate. And we've got there 63 volts. That's probably about right for the triode plate. Goes through this resistor here. We've got B plus of 164. Okay. So pin 2 is the grid, and that should be giving me a loud buzz. Pin 3 is the cathode, and it's attached to ground. Pin 4 is the heater ground, which is attached to ground. Pin 5, I know we've got a heater, but I'll check AC volts anyway. Should be there. Pin 5, we've got what? Oh, AC volts. 5.3 volts. A little bit low, but it should be right. Okay, back to DC. Pin 6 is the plate of the output valve. Pin 6. Yep, there we go. It's got nothing on it. Nothing. Zilch, zip. Why? Check again. Pin 6 is a pentode plate. This is on DC volts, 500. There's nothing on the plate. Not a sausage. That goes through the primary of the output transformer, going into the output transformer, 230 volts, coming out of the output transformer, zip. I think we've got an open circuit primary. Bugger. Is this thing worth it? Really? Honestly, I'm that far from chucking this thing in the bin. It's not worth it. I've probably got an output transformer sitting there. I'll just check that it's not just a wire come adrift, but yep, that's that's not going to help us at all, having nothing on the plate, is it? What have we got on the screen? 110, yep, ground, and the grid going in. All right, that explains the lack of noise. All right, well, I've hooked up this output transformer. It's got about 320 ohms on the primary DC and about 1 ohm on the secondary. I'm hoping it'll be near enough. If it's not too bad, because that's the only one I've got, it's my last spare output transformer, and I would have hoped to have used it on something a little bit more interesting than this, but anyway, that's the way it is. It's that or nothing. So I've got it on dim bulb. I'll put on some power, turn on. Yep, still nothing happening. The dim bulb didn't even blink. I've got this hooked up to the bench speaker again. I've got heaters happening now. I can see the glow. Let's see if I can hear anything. And I'm still not hearing anything. What's going on here? I've got a bit of a noise through the speaker there. Only very slight. Oh, I've got hot noise there. Oh, that was the tone control I was touching. That's all right. All right, so I should have some grid hum here. Okay, well that sounds promising. So we should be able to get music through that if we're lucky. All right, I might just hook it up, see if I can get it to play. Okay, well, I've got it. I got the chassis, such as it is, put back in the case just because it's a convenient way of hooking everything up. I've got the turntable plugged into it, input plugged in. I'll take it off dim bulb and put it on full power. I'll probably need that anyway to run the turntable properly. Alright, so record on the turntable, let's just give it a run. And we have hardly any output. Could be because the output transformer is not suitable for it. I don't know. It's been an interesting exercise in futility, this. Well, the bins are collected Tuesday morning. It's Saturday afternoon now. So I thought, well, before I throw it in the bin, I'll see if I can work out just why I'm not getting enough audio out of this. So I've hooked the scope up directly to the cartridge to see what kind of output I'm going to get from that. And I've got the Rolling Stones Honky Tonk Women on the turntable, but you can't get me for copyright because I haven't got it hooked up, so you won't hear it. So here we go, putting it on the record and see what we get. A few drum beats, then I might just... Now I've got this set at 1 volt per centimetre, and I'm getting about 1 volt either side of the centre line on the quiet bits, peaking to probably 2 volts on the big peak. 2 volts, that's 4 volts peak to peak. But it only hits that occasionally. And just momentarily. So I'd say 3 to 4 volts peak to peak. Interesting watching music. Anyway, so I guess that's probably enough output to drive this thing. It should be by rights. I know some crystal cartridges put out 6 volts peak to peak. But yeah, 3 or 4 should be enough to at least get a decent, half decent output out of this. So I don't think it's a cartridge, so that's one thing eliminated. Okay, let's have a look at what voltages we got here. So for a start, we'll see what we've got on the grid, the triode, and that's just here. There it is coming in from the pot. So there, oh, noise. 5.9 volts on the grid. And have a look at the grid of the pentode too. Now the pentode grid is on pin, oh well, it's obviously that one there that the cap goes to from the plate. Pentode section, plate pin 1, grid pin 9, so that's that one there, yep. And it's got minus 12 on it. I suppose that's a reasonable grid bias, that's okay. So, put him on the 500 range. Looking at the plate of the triode, 152 on the plate of the triode. Really? 152. Plate of the triode is pin 1. Pin 1, plate, triode, yep. 151. Should be writing these down, I suppose. Pentode plate, pin 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That one. Okay, what's it showing? 158. 158 on the plate. Okay, and I suppose the cathode is, well, the cathodes are grounded. Not much else to check. The voltages are all there, and interestingly I get a healthy grid hum. There it is. Well, I'll get a crackle. Don't know. Well, strangely enough, after testing it, I am getting some sound out of it. The volume's not great, but sounds pretty distorted. I wonder if it's worth changing some of those paper caps and checking the resistor values and see if things improve a little bit. Okay, so now I'm looking at the triode plate on the scope, and it's showing very, very little. There's less coming out than there is going in. I'm getting a bit of hum on it, which might just be the smoothing cap's a little bit tired. No, there's just nothing on that plate. Now if I put it on dim bulb, let's see what happens. We got a lot bigger output from the triode. Although the peaks are all going negative, it's not going much positive, and it sounds a bit distorted. So I'm thinking the bias for that triode must be set up all wrong. And of course it's not the original tube, so I don't know what it really should be, but I can look up what it should be and see if I can set it up to be that. We'll see. We've got that voltage divider network there, just a couple of 150 ohm resistors between plate and ground, and then we've got a grid resistor. So, okay, curiouser and curiouser. I clipped the grid resistor to the triode section, so it should have no bias, and yeah, probably some distortion, but I'm getting plenty of volume from that. So I think I need to tinker with that grid bias, and we might just get a decent sound out of this thing after all. Okay, well, it's a very hot day today in Perth. It's only, 10:30 in the morning, and the temperature in the shed here is already pushing 40 degrees. So I won't be staying here all day, that's for sure. I've been fiddling with this amplifier. I've replaced the power supply caps, some of the resistors that were out of spec, and replaced all the paper caps with these black caps. And as far as the biases are concerned, the bias settled on around 1.5, 1.8, minus 1.5, 1.8 volts on the grid of the triode, and it seemed to operate reasonably well around there. What I've done is I've replaced the voltage divider resistors here. I'll just zoom in a little bit. I've replaced the voltage divider resistors here and the bias resistor for the grid resistor for the 6AB8, and I've just left them in circuit in case I end up putting another 6AB8 there, but I'll just tape them off, insulate them, and just label them bias for 6AB8 if used or something like that. I put a 4.7 meg resistor across the grid of the 6GV8 to ground, and that seems to stabilise it. You can see there it's sitting on about 1.17, 1.16 volts. Probably can't see that, but it's been sitting there for a while, 1.19. Oh, that's odd. But it seems to sit around 1.1, 1.2 maximum. I think that's probably a fairly good operating range for it. I can fiddle with different values of resistors, but basically it's basically just a grid leak, and let it bias itself to somewhere around 1.1, 1.2 volts. The grid bias on the pentode section, it says here on the spec sheet, 15 minus 15 volts, which is pretty much what it's got. I don't think that's a problem. I'll leave that one alone. But that's it for now. I think the only thing I have to do now is to fit the output transformer to it. I think I can fit that in the case. Just a matter of drilling a couple of holes and riveting it in. So I'll get on and do that, and that'll be the chassis done and dusted, pending review, shall we say. Well, I've managed to shoehorn in the output transformer. I've pop riveted it in here and here. This pop rivet is for the tag strip, which takes the HT wires, because the original transformer had its own terminals. This one doesn't. So, yep, hopefully I haven't done anything terrible. I'll just pop the tubes back in and we'll give it a run in a minute. Might go in and have a cool drink and cool down a bit because it's over 40 degrees in here now and becoming pretty uncomfortable. So if I do any more work on this today, I think I'll just move outside on the back table perhaps. Alright, so I'll give that a run shortly, but no reason to think it won't be okay. Okay, it's way too hot in the shed. It's still pretty warm out here, but it's a bit cooler. And yeah, I've cleaned up the front mesh. It came up pretty well. I polished the little HMV badge up. I might do something more with that, but for the moment I'm leaving it like that. And I've just repainted the back panel. And to hold this on, I'm using double-sided tape. Now this stuff is pretty serious double-sided tape. You can't cut it with scissors because it grabs the scissors and won't let go. I'm going to try cutting it with a knife. So we'll just try that. I think this stuff is intended for mounting mirrors or something. I'm not really sure what I bought it for initially, but it was lying around in the shed and I thought, well, I may as well use it. It's kind of cut in two, I hope. Yep. So I'll just put it on here. You can't probably see it against the black background there, but there we go. And the other side, press that on thoroughly. It's got a layer to peel off this side. Okay, now I'll just place this over it, checking that the holes line up. It looks about as right as it's ever going to be. So there we have it. It should look all right, I suppose. Put that aside for the moment. I've finally finished the rest of the cabinet. I recovered it using the same method I showed you for the lid. I wasn't going to show you the whole thing. It's turned out pretty well. I'm not in love with this blue colour, but it's what I've got. It will have to do. So I've covered the motorboard in blue basically because I was running out of the cream colour. It was originally a dirty cream colour, I suppose. And of course, you've already seen the lid. Did that last time. So it's pretty much all ready to go back together. The amp is just about done. Those hinges on the back, I'll show you those. I gave them all a coat of zinc for a start to help prevent rust, and then a coat of grey scratch primer and just rubbed them back slightly to remove some of the pitting. And a coat of this cream colour is probably the closest I've got to the cabinet, and it's not quite right, but it doesn't stick out too much on the cabinet, so I'm going to use it. If I was more fussy, I'd go and buy something that matched better, but I think this will do the trick. So it's a case of putting it back in the cabinet. Now, this grill, I was going to just try and put it back in and use the original nails, hoping they'll find their original spots. If that doesn't work, then I'll look at putting some little screws through it, but I'll try the nails first. So let's see how we go with that. This is a bit tricky to get in. There's a couple of ways, but feeding it in through the front diagonally under there, and then it has to move in and up that way around the various pleats and bits and pieces. And there we go. So I'll turn that upside down and see if I can nail it in. I'll probably need a punch or something to get to those nails. Well, that's gone in all right. Doesn't look too bad. Now I'll see if we can put the amp back in. So here we go. I haven't actually tested this since I changed the output transformer, but unless I've done something extremely silly, it should be okay. If not, well, it's easy enough to take out again, I suppose. I do hope I don't have to though. So that will just sit in there like that, and put a couple of screws in it. There we go. I've punched a bigger hole in the centre of some of these knob felts, and they should just go over the centre spindle like that. And they seem to be about right. So I'll put those on. Where's the flat on that? There. Yeah. All right, now I don't have a speaker to hook up to it yet. I'm going to get one tomorrow. I've found another oval speaker similar to the one that was in it. In the meantime, I've got another one I'll just put in there temporarily. It's an old car speaker, but it'll do the job just so I can test it. This thing really is, the speaker that is, really is not very good. Having said that, it's the same as my bench speaker, so it should sound at least as good as that, not that that's saying very much. Okay, so that's that done. Let's get the turntable in. So I need to put these clips through the holes and turn them. Make sure that's sitting on its springs properly, which it kind of is. Yep, that's all right. Now I'll have to plug the power in as I lower it down because I don't have enough cord. There we go, that's in. Now, this will, I suppose it goes in backwards first, like that. And I've got a couple of screws there which I'm just cleaning up, but that will hold that in for now. Even the cord cleaned up reasonably well. I'll take the back off that plug and make sure it's safe, but I think it should be okay. Pop those hinges on. The wind chimes are going, the breeze has come up, which is nice. It's cooled down a little bit now. That's upside down. Well, that seems to work all right. It lines up okay. It's all straight. Well, it's all back together, more or less. I still have to put the proper speaker in it, and I don't expect much from this one. So put a record on it and see what happens. That sounds pretty tinny. I didn't expect much from this speaker, but the other thing is that there's no compensation network for this cartridge. The cartridge output was fed straight into the tube. And I thought that the tone control would probably be enough to adjust for that. I did mess around with it a little bit, but I think from the sound of that, I'm going to have to put in just a simple compensation network, a couple of caps on the input to balance it out a bit. And I am hoping that the speaker will improve things a bit. It did sound better than this on the bench, so it's deteriorated since I put it back into the cabinet, which is of some concern. Well, it's another hot day, and I've set up on the table in the backyard. The first test of the record player sounded terrible, and I thought I need to have another look at the grid bias on that triode. I've thrown away the idea of the grid leak resistor just to hold the bias. It was holding it at around 1 volt, which clearly isn't enough because it sounded dreadful. I figured the thing was at cut-off at 5.8 or 9 volts. That was fully off. So I'd say maybe 5 volts might be the end of it. So I tried to pick somewhere in between. I've gone for about 2.5 volts. I've made up another voltage divider network, and it's giving me about 2.1 volts. Anyway, I'll give you a closer look at what I've done. Okay, so we have a 270 ohm here and a 68 ohm here, so that should be held just 2.5 volts off ground, minus 2.5 volts, and 1 mega ohm resistor feeding that to the grid, and it's sitting there at 2.14 volts. So I'll put that back in and see if that sounds any better. I've been here for half an hour or so playing 45s, and that grid bias at 2.1, 2.2 volt, or minus 2.1, 2.2 volts seems to have improved the sound a great deal. It's not great. I don't know if it ever was great. I'd say it's probably acceptable for what it is. So pretty much I'm going to call it sorted. I could fiddle with grid bias a little bit. I'll put something on here that probably won't get me done for copyright. 33, and see how this goes. I mean, the sound is, oh, we've got sirens there now. We've got a fire somewhere in the neighbourhood today. It's still a little bit lacking in bass. Anyway, I don't want to play too much of anything, but it is working to the extent that I suppose it should work. It's not a bad little unit. I am tempted to put a good amp and a good set of speakers in it. You could fit a couple of speakers in the back of the cabinet and something that would give it a little bit of grunt. Might be fun. Although as it is, it's all right. Not sure what I'm going to do with it, but I'm kind of glad to see the back of it. Although it's been a bit of a journey, and I've learned a few things from it, so that's what you want, I guess. So that's more or less it for this one. I may tinker with it a little bit more, but it's pretty much done and dusted. I've got to put some clips on it. I've got to get a handle and put on it, but it's pretty much done. I have a couple of proper wirelesses awaiting me in the shed, so I'll get onto those fairly soon. But thanks for watching, and I hope you can join me in the shed next time.